Today I am joined by Megan Fellows, who works for Response. Could you tell us a little bit about the role that you play in Response?
Sure. And thank you, Elise, for inviting Response. This is a great resource for the library, and we're honored to be here. So thank you very much for that. My name is Megan Fellows. I've been with Response for about 6 years now, and I am now the Education Prevention Coordinator at Response.
Awesome. From the title of this discussion, you can see that we'll be discussing domestic violence along with different services that Response provides for the community. I just wanted to start by addressing some terminology that we might use, mostly me. If I use male pronouns or if we use male pronouns, we're not saying that all abusive partners are male. An abuser can be male or female, right?
Absolutely, yes. So a little bit about Response. The mission and vision really is that all people should be able to live a life that's violence-free. And so we recognize that there are often we recognize that all people can be and are impacted by domestic violence, regardless of their gender, age, social status, financial status. It is something that reaches across all communities and it needs to be spoken about more. And so here at Response, we believe that, again, all people should be able to live a life that is violence-free. And we have several services that support people in Coos County, New Hampshire. Each county in New Hampshire has their own crisis center, and in Coos County it is Response. We have several services that we provide, such as a 24-hour support and info line that is done by staff and volunteers. We have emergency shelter for individuals who are fleeing domestic violence. We do advocacy for individuals who are getting protective orders, and we can do hospital, law enforcement, and court accompaniments. We do emergency transportation for individuals who need a ride to court. We do info and referrals to other community agencies. We do safety planning with individuals, whether they are choosing to stay in the home or leave the home. And then we do K through 12 and public education, as I am today. But you're right, Elise, when you talk about the different demographics, we often hear more of the national statistics, the 1 in 4 women that will be impacted by domestic violence. But some of those underserved categories that I was referencing to before are categories like men. Nationally, it's 1 to 10 that will talk about the impact of domestic violence within their relationship. But we also know LGBTQ plus communities or individuals with disabilities are also at an equal or higher rate, even in some instances, than the stereotypical heterosexual couple that we often think about when we are discussing domestic violence. And so again, it's really something that impacts communities across the board. And so again, thank you for letting us speak here today.
Of course, and you were talking about the services, so I did pull up the 24/7 hotline that you have. That's the number for that. There's also a text number, a phone number for the Colebrook office, correct, and then the website. So I'll bring this up a little later. All right. So let's get into the topic of domestic violence. So how is it defined? How do you define it?
So we define it as one person trying to gain or maintain power and control over another individual. That's kind of the basic terminology that it all boils down to.
Right. So what different forms does domestic violence take?
So it can take a variety of forms. So the most general ones that we hear of are physical abuse, and that can be, anything like grabbing someone by the arm or pinching someone. There's also verbal abuse or emotional abuse, and that's kind of those name calls and put downs, things of that nature. And then there's also sexual abuse, and that's really any unwanted sexual touch without the other person's consent. And that can be something like kissing or even hugging.
Mm. So with these different forms, I've seen spectrums of relationships from healthy, unhealthy to abusive, and they all have different behaviors that they list kind of in all the different categories. So what do healthy relationships look like? What are some red flags that you might see in relationships that are unhealthy or abusive?
Yeah. So you're right. When we want to talk about what does abusive look like, we have to know what kind of healthy looks like. And so we talk about healthy behaviors or green flag behaviors. And those are the things that you want in relationships across the board, whether it's the relationship with your parent, your child, your coworker, your boss, or your dating partner or your spouse. Those are things like caring, supportive, loyalty, respect, kindness, healthy communication, healthy ways that we resolve conflicts. Um, those are what we talk about when we talk about healthy behaviors. And again, those are really across the board relationships. Unhealthy behaviors are kind of those things when, maybe there's some name calling or being condescending to someone. Maybe it's playing a tickling game that's gone too far and not really fun for the other person anymore. Lying, spreading rumors, not being trustworthy, judgmental. Those are things that we start thinking about as being kind of unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to remember that 100% of us will be in relationships, and 100% of us will sometimes do some unhealthy behaviors at some point in time. And so we have to think about those unhealthy behaviors and then wonder, like, when do those unhealthy behaviors become abusive? And they become abusive when those unhealthy behaviors are used to gain power over someone, to gain control over someone, to manipulate someone, to make them feel bad about themselves or their family and friends, or to make them feel scared. And we know that not only is it used in this regard, but there's a pattern of this behavior. Because I said, all of us will kind of, all of us maybe yell sometimes when we shouldn't, or, call someone a name when we really wish that we hadn't. But it's not our pattern of behavior. We generally hang out and all that green flag stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Normally we act like that. So it's really looking at it and seeing when there's a pattern of behavior.
Awesome. So when you were talking about having that power and control, so what are some tactics that in an abusive relationship that an abuser will gain that power, that control over their victim?
Yeah, so you're right. There's lots of tactics that someone can use to do that. One might be sexual coercion, and that might look like trying to guilt someone into, maybe going a little further than they really wanted to. Or maybe that individual has had a little bit too much to drink that night and they can't really consent to what's going on. It might look like financial abuse. Those type of tactics are when the two people in the relationship don't have equal access or say to how the money is spent in that house. It may look like one person goes out and does all the work and the other person spends it all. It may be sabotaging that um, the person who is trying to work,
Mhm.
so that they're not allowed to um, have kind of that support outside of the house. It can look like sexism, which are those really gender and rigid stereotypical roles where um, men are afforded certain privileges because of their gender, or women are seen to be in certain roles because of their gender. And then there's really no room for anything that might be outside of those two boxes as well, which again, we talked about those underserved categories like LGBTQ communities. Um, Using children can often be a tactic as well. It could look like someone getting someone pregnant when that's not what they had planned, or it could look like someone saying, hey, if you ever leave, I'll make sure that you never see those kids again. Other tactics are called, we kind of classify as denying, minimizing, or blaming, and that looks like um, just denying that the abuse is even happening.
Mm.
Um, Minimizing could be like, oh, that wasn't so bad, or minimizing when you're trying to communicate how you're feeling about the situation, or outright blaming, switching what's happened and not taking accountability for one's responsibility and deflecting that upon the other person, such as, if you didn't come home so late, I wouldn't have to be so mad.
Mm.
It can be intimidation and threats, intimidating by looking at someone in a certain way, or perhaps punching a wall next to someone. Um, they could have hit you, but they didn't, type of deal, but you
Mm.
see how strong that they really can be. Emotional and verbal abuse, what we talked about, those name calling, being degrading, working on someone in that type of manner. And then there's extreme jealousy and isolation. Extreme jealousy would be um, kind of always wanting to check in on that person and, kind of maybe always accusing them of cheating when there's really no justification for it. And then isolation is huge as well. Um, and that can look like geography, kind of maybe even like Coos County, New Hampshire, very rural. Or isolation looks like not being able to be with your friends or your family anymore. And doing things like, yeah, you maybe can go visit for a little while, but you'll need to be there for like an hour, and that includes your drive time. Um, those are some of the tactics and kind of the more frequent ones that we see, although this is not a comprehensive list.
Right. You mentioned isolation as one of the tactics. Have you, as an organization, been more worried about that with the recent stay-at-home orders? What has gone on this year?
Yeah, so when March and April hit and everything kind of shut down, we saw our numbers drop
Mm.
drastically, as did the other crisis centers in New Hampshire. And of course, that's very concerning to us because now people aren't reaching out. And why aren't they reaching out? Well, again, we go back to that isolation. And if you're now home with the person perhaps who is abusing you, it makes it really difficult to make that phone call. So what we did at Response and other crisis centers have done as well is we've tried to do a web chat and a text platform, so that perhaps if they're not able to make that phone call, they can shoot that text. And again, I would like to, and I don't think I said it at the top, so I'd like to put it in here now, is that all of our services are confidential and free. And so you don't even have to give your name if you choose to text. It actually comes up as a number, or even if you choose to make that call in. Your privacy is of our great concern. So I just wanted to make sure that we put that in there as well.
Right.
But
I did bring up the numbers again. So there is this, the text number is here as well. So if that's a resource for yourself or for someone you know, get that number to them so they can talk. All right, so we talked about quite a few different tactics that then the abuser can use to control a victim. How can a victim counter these tactics, whether it's something that's been going on forever or something that they feel is just kind of starting?
Yeah, so I'm going to advocate, obviously, to reach out, whether it's to a crisis center or to a friend, and a friend that you really can trust, who's there for you, so that um, they can help you to, and like we can help you to safety plan, whether you choose to stay or choose to leave. Um, Again, education, that awareness of like, hey, what are the things that I do want and what are the things that I don't want? What's healthy and what's unhealthy? And trying to keep those connections with at least one person around you.
I've seen that there's a repetitive cycle of abuse. Could you kind of explain what that would look like?
Sure, yeah. So I went real fast through all them tactics. Um, and again, those are just some of them. But when all of these tactics are being used, there's also this cycle, as you indicate, that's also going on at the same time. And so it starts off with what we call the honeymoon phase. And really this is generally where we're seeing all that green flag type of behavior. Because when we generally meet someone, that's what's drawing us in, right? We feel like this person is supportive and caring, and they're really doing all of those things that we're looking for. But then as time kind of goes on, we feel some tension start to build. And that might be where we're seeing some of those patterns of behavior too. Um, and so the tension starts to build, and then there's some sort of explosion, whatever that explosion may be. And it might start off like, a really good yelling match between the two of you. And then it goes back to that honeymoon phase again. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. It won't happen again. And so it may not for a while, but that tension builds again. And then there's some other explosion again. And we get back to the honeymoon phase. I didn't mean it. I'll go to counseling. I drank hard stuff I shouldn't have. I'm sorry.
Mm.
Whatever it may be. But what we know about this cycle is that honeymoon phase, that I'm sorry, I didn't mean it phase, that shrinks over time. And that explosion phase, that escalates over time. So what was maybe a good kind of yelling match a year ago has now maybe escalated a year later to, throwing the remote across the room. And then 2 years down the line from that, what does it look like?
Mm.
So we know that this cycle kind of goes round and round and makes it really difficult for people to leave. And it can take upwards of 7 times before an individual is really ready to break free from that cycle, because all those tactics are being used on them all the time. And just all kinds of barriers and challenges are also in place. And so it makes it really difficult for that person to leave.
On the COAS Family House response page, it says, quote, abuse victims are often afraid to seek help. If if we believe someone we know is in an abusive or unhealthy relationship, how should we go about approaching them? How can we help them?
Yeah, so we talk about, being trauma informed a
Mhm.
lot. And really what trauma informed is talking about is thinking about that person's lived experience, right? Thinking about all those tactics that's been used against that person. And so um, to really be mindful of that and not go in there being judgmental, right? Or thinking that they're going to leave the second that you think that they should, because
Mhm.
everybody is on their own path. So first of all, just being kind of mindful and being, putting your kind of biases and judgment aside and being there to really support your friend or whoever it may be, and using what we call some active listening. And that means that you're listening to learn, not listening
Mhm.
to respond. And so you're listening to learn what is it that this person needs and how can you support them. Knowing your area resources. So again, thank you for putting that information up and having us on today. Knowing your area resources so that, you know what, you may not know what to do, but you can be like, hey, I know that these people here, they can help you. Um, and then empowering people, right? Letting individuals make their own choices that's going to be best for them and their path. Because if we think about people who have experienced domestic violence, their choices have been taken from them. And
Mhm.
really, someone else has been in control, maybe for a really long time. And so, having some patience and letting that person figure out what is it that I do want and empowering them to set their goals and do that in their own way. Um, because we really need to build that person back up. So much has been stripped away from them, um, and just being a compassionate person for them during that time.
That's good to know. But as a community, what are there steps that we can take to help against domestic violence as a whole?
So I will always say we're looking for volunteers. So that's always a great way. If you want to get active, you can always contact Response and we can talk about volunteer opportunities. But, uh, educating yourself, and so that you can be able to advocate when you see something going on. When I go into schools, we talk a lot about becoming an upstander,
Mhm.
um, because bystander kind of has that connotation that you're just watching something happen, whereas an upstander can step in. And so we ask people to do that. And so if you see something, we talk about the 4Ds, and so maybe you're direct and you say something right there like, hey, that's not cool, you don't talk to someone like that, or whatever it might be. If you feel like it's safe to do that, you might delegate. You might say, you know what, I can't intervene right now because that's not safe, but I'm going to go get someone else who can help. You might distract in the situation to kind of stop whatever is happening, and then be able to get the person away if that's what you needed to do. Or maybe it's delay, and maybe that's when you have those conversations. Let's say it was your friend who is making you know a joke that just maybe shouldn't have been made, or whatever it is. And you talk to that person later. Or if it's your friend and you saw something happen, you can talk to them later. Anytime there's awareness campaigns, I say jump in on those as well. Um, and really just looking out for one another.
Well, thank you. That was a lot of good information. And again, I'm going to throw up um, the phone numbers, the website. If people want to volunteer and help out, is that Colebrook phone number a good number to reach out to people?
Uh, yep, you can. If because during these challenging times, we're not always in office right now. So you can always call the hotline there and and let them know, and an advocate will be able to get to you.
That's good information. Um, I would just want to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing this information. It is good to be educated as a community so that if we do see something, we can say something, or just in our lives, we can know what's right and what's not in a relationship. So thank you, Megan, so much for coming on and talking about it with us.
Thank you, Elise. Can I add 2 more phone numbers to that? I'm sorry,
Yes.
I should have said it to you earlier. So we do have 3 offices actually, and so I am based out of the Colebrook office, but we also have a office in Groveton. The number there is 636-1747.
Mhm.
And we also have our main offices in Berlin, and the number there is 752-5679.
Oh, 7-9. All right. So again, thank you so much. I hope everyone got something out of this. And those phone numbers are all listed on the website as well, correct?
Correct.
Awesome. So thank you for watching and have a good night.
Thank you.